Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to announce that we are starting a new book called Shar, Habitachon. I've been wanting to start this book for a long time already, but we were learning Tanya, and then we continued the next book of Tanya, Shar Yuchid Vemuna. Then we continued the next book of Tanya, Igerisat Teshuvah, the letter on Teshuvah. So now I'm thrilled that we learned those three books of Tanya. The three books of Tanya took us, thank God, around 5 years or so. I think we started in November of 2018. Maybe it was November 2019, but I'm pretty sure it was 18. So it's like 6 years. Now, as we enter November of 2024, we are continuing on to Shar Habitachon. You don't need the book today, but the book that we will be using is this one. You can find it on Amazon. You could also find it on any Jewish bookstore, Kahas. I sent you an email yesterday that has a link to buy the book, either on Amazon Prime or from a Jewish bookstore, Kahas. But this is the book that we will be using, Shar Bitachon. It has Hebrew and English. We're only going to be focusing on the English of it. And having said that, you don't need the book, for sure not today, because most of it is going to be outside. But we will try to start inside, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen. You don't actually really need the book because you could also follow along with me on the screen, but you could also go on, just Google the words Jewish Novato space and Shara Bitachon, and you will actually come up with the entire book online, or Chabad.org. And I'll share the link where you can find this online. Like literally, the text of it is online. I do recommend having your own book of it. So on Shabbos, or you could take it with you and learn wherever you are, review and go forward. It's a beautiful book. And as I said, I've been wanting to learn this book in our class for a long time already. The Rebbe encouraged many people who came with doubts or questions or worries. The Rebbe was surprised and says, "Have you not learned Shara B'tachon?" And the Rebbe wanted everyone to learn this like 3 or 4 times to really allow the message and the teachings of this incredible book to permeate and to really get inside and not only be lip service, but really something that we could actually work with and use as an exercise. So just some background about the book. Shar HaBitachon literally means the gate of trust. And it's part of a bigger book called Chovat HaLevavot, which means duties of the heart. So first, I'm going to explain to you who the author was. I'm going to explain to you what the book in general is about, and I'll explain what this specific gate of the book is about. So the author, he lived before the Rambam. The Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, lived in the 1100s. This author lived around 100 years prior to him. So he lived around 1,000 years ago. He lived in Spain, different cities of Spain. He wrote this book, if I'm not mistaken, while he was in Cordova, Spain. The author's name is Rabbeinu Bechai ben Yosef ibn Pekuda. That was his name. He was a Spanish rabbi, and he wrote the book actually in Judeo Arabic, in the Jewish language of the time. It was translated around 100 years later by the famous translator from Arabic to Hebrew. Um, and what's interesting is the Rambam, who lived 100 years later, also wrote one of his famous books called The Guide to the Perplexed, Moreh Nevuchim, also wrote it in Judeo-Arabic. And the translator's son translated that book from Arabic to Hebrew. So anyway, in short, this book was written by Rabbeinu Bechai. You don't have to remember his name. Um, he wrote it around 1,000 years ago. The need of the time, the reason why he wrote it was, and he named the book Duties of the Heart, in Hebrew, Chovas Halavavos, because at the time, most of the books being authored and being uh, given over from the times of the Talmud all the way till his generation, which was 700, 800 years later, was all books about law, how to keep Shabbat, how to observe family purity and mikvah, how to put on tefillin. It was all the mitzvot, action-based mitzvot, how to do it, which was obviously very necessary. But what wasn't getting enough attention, or what wasn't really being taught and being written in a book, was the non-action based mitzvahs, which are extremely important. Non-action based mitzvahs like loving God. It's not an action. It's not about putting on tefillin or about lighting Shabbat candles. It's about the feeling in the heart. So this author wrote a book about 10 duties of the heart, 10 gates, 10 chapters, 10 areas where it's more on the heart. It's an obligation of a Jew to have in our heart. So the fourth of these 10 gates is the gate of trust, which is the one we are going to be focusing on. But I find this topic in general to be so beautiful. If I were to ask you, what's a harder mitzvah to observe, an action-based mitzvah or a heart-based mitzvah? A mitzvah that's obligated on our heart, or a mitzvah that's obligated um, on our arms or on our head? There's a mitzvah to study Torah, and by opening a Talmud and studying, you get a mitzvah. But what about a mitzvah, or there's a mitzvah to honor your parents by showing up when they need you? You are honoring your parents. That's a mitzvah. And Simchas Torah and Sukkot and all the mitzvahs we just had, blowing the shofar, those are action based. But I would argue and say that even though that's quantity wise the most of the mitzvahs of the Torah, the non-action based mitzvahs could be much harder to fulfill. I'm not saying for sure, but I'm saying there's definitely room to say that the mitzvahs that are just on our heart to love God or to have our trust and faith in God, even when times are tough, that could be a much harder um, um, uh, mitzvah to observe. Yes, Lynn.
So I've seen that the Navy SEALs, when they train and who they choose and who they don't make it, there's two criteria. One is that you're capable, that you can do the action, right? The other one is if you're trustworthy. And if you're highly capable but low trustworthy, they won't choose you. They would rather have someone low capable but high trustworthy. So they work on trust number one, and they figure they can bring you up if you're somewhat capable. But they say, if you look at businesses, they choose when they interview, can you do this? What's your experience? Da, 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 da. There's no qualifier, are you a person of trust?
I
And
love
they
it.
say
I love
just
it.
absolutely upside down, because look at our Navy SEALs, that they have to be built on trust.
That's amazing. And really, if you take any relationship, even though, me and you are not signing up for the Navy SEALs, the first thing in a relationship is going to be trust. One of the most important things. Where does a relationship go bad? When they don't trust each other, when one person can't be trusted. The idea of trust in a relationship is so essential. And that's why this book is so crucial, because it's all about our trust in God, or it's not of course the action has to be there, but there's a foundation of trust that needs to be there for the action to be meaningful. And even just talking about businesses, Lynn, I think so much in businesses are people, could be very capable, but if they don't trust their employer, if the employer doesn't keep their word, if they don't feel that their employer has their back, they're not going to be as productive. So the idea of trust in a relationship, and you could even see it in business, is being taught more and more, because you get more out of people when there's a trust factor there.
Right. And
And
one more
yeah,
thing.
go ahead.
So Warren Buffett, who's one of the wealthiest men in the world,
Yeah.
he has, at least this was a few years ago, I took a class called The Speed of Trust, because once you trust people, you can do business quicker. And so it's called The Speed of Trust. And so they mentioned Warren Buffett has 7 people in his international office. That's it. Because what they will check is, can we trust you? Then they don't have to do all the vetting and all the attorney stuff. They either can work with you or not. So if they can't work with you, that's it. But if they can work with you, it just goes very quickly. So, and I can't remember the Stephen Covey. It's a Stephen Covey
Nice.
course I took in person, and it was called The Speed of Trust.
Amazing. So my goal would be that in learning this book, our relationship with God is stronger. And also, I don't know if the word is quicker, but it's easier and there'll be a speed in our decision making in doing a mitzvah or in yeah, so much that so what takes up so much of our time and our heart is the worry that we have in things going on in our life. When you have Shar Habitachon, this book, I put in my email to the participants to our class last night that I literally I do feel that this book is life changing because when you live with this a style of trust in God, so much of the background, so much of the headspace, so much of our worry just goes away. I'll give you an example. When when we drive as a family, I'm usually the driver. We drive, it's not often anymore, but we would drive down to San Diego. I would drive most of the ride. We're usually going later at night. But if I'm getting a ride with someone, sometimes in the community, I need a ride somewhere, what I'll find is sometimes I'm sitting in the passenger seat, so I don't have a pedal or a brake, but sometimes I'm still pressing my foot down as if I'm braking because it's not. I can't even. Maybe because I need the control, or maybe I'm worried about how the other person is driving. Maybe I get it from my mother, and my mother definitely does that. So I'm not sure, but I don't know if anyone could relate to me where it's hard for you to give up that control. Shara Betachon is not about just giving up the control, is about realizing that we're in the best hands. That, being a backseat driver could be annoying for the driver, and it could be even annoying for the person because you're not relaxed. You're sitting on the side, unable to do anything and just going crazy. Shara Betachon helps realize that you're being in God's hands is better than allowing yourself to be in control. Of course, we have to do the work, but it brings out the best result when you have the the premise that God is with us, that we put our trust in God. Obviously, we have to learn the book, but I'm so excited to learn this book with you. In Hebrew, and I've shared this before. In Hebrew, the term for worry is da'aga. It has a dalid, an aleph, a gimel, and a hey, daga. It means in Hebrew, it means worry or yeah, anxiety. Now, the only letter, what's amazing is there's four letters in that word daga, and what's similar about all of those four letters is that it's the beginning of the alphabet, right? In the word daga, you have an aleph, a gimel, a dalet, and a hey. It's four of the first five letters. The only letter missing from that word of the beginning letters is a bet. Da'aga is missing a bet. Other than that, it has the first five letters. So what I've seen written somewhere, forgot even where, is that the reason why a bet is missing from that word, even though it has the other first letters of the alphabet, is because if you have bitachon, you won't have da'aga. The word bet, the letter bet, doesn't exist in that word because da'aga exists, worry exists, anxiety exists when you don't have trust. But if you have bitachon, if you have the bet, which stands for bitachon, then you won't have a place for worry. So I find that to be a beautiful segue into the book because our goal is to be not in control, but our goal is to allow God to uh, to be with us in our life. And as much as we could do a mitzvah and know that God's with us, it's entirely different when we work on that in our heart. When whatever comes our way, and whether it's health issues, financial issues, relationship issues, to know that you trust in God that the best result will happen. And I'm going to do the work, but the premise is the trust in God. You'll see the result come out differently, and you'll see your process of getting to the result will also be different. And as a result, the result will be different. In Hebrew, the word I'm going to explain a little bit more. There's emuna. Emuna means faith. Faith is the principle of our Judaism, is faith in God. Hashem Echad, that we believe and we have faith that God is one. We're definitely faith. We're all about faith. The word in Hebrew for faith is emuna. Emuna also has the connotation of uman, an an or an omen or an uman is a craftsperson, a person that is skilled or professional in a certain craft. They're called an uman of that craft. So it's like being a professional, someone that is consistent in what they do and learned a trade from many years of experience. So in Hebrew, emuna and uman, omen, has the same root of aleph mem nun, and it's basically that having faith in God is something that we have to train ourselves into. It's something that takes time to develop, but when we have it, we become skilled in it. So it's a work. It's not something that comes automatic, meaning we are born with this faith. And as the word is, anachnu maminim b'nei maminim. We are believers, the children of believers, but it's not something we could just rely on, that we know it's there. It's something we have to constantly work on so that when we need it, we could bring it out. Just like, now it's the World Series. A person could hit a home run and they're like, you know what? I don't have to practice anymore because I know I could do it. It's working every day at it. So emuna, faith, is also something that we have to work on. And by studying about it is the best way to work on it. And then, God willing, we could use it at every day of our life. The next thing I want to share is that emuna means faith, but then you have bitachon, which means trust. What we are really going to be leaning in is about trusting in God. Because while emuna is faith in God, trust is still very different. Could anyone give me their thoughts of what's the difference between, Steve Elman, I would love to hear from you. How would you explain the difference between emuna and bitachon, faith in God and trust in God?
Faith is a feeling and trust is an action. And if
Oh,
you trust, you're doing something. How's that?
I like that. I like that. Very good. So what are you doing by trust? I just need to hear a little more.
You trust the bridge will hold when you take a step on it. You trust the bridge. It's not you have faith in the bridge.
Got it.
You have faith in that the guy built it, but you have trust in what you're doing is acceptable.
So that I think that's that exactly. I love that. So emuna is more, I have faith. I know it's there, and I have full faith that God is with us. When trust is, I know it will happen the right way because of my faith in God. But then it's not just relying on the faith of lip service of the heart, is actually trusting that the best result will happen.
I will say, I will
It's
add this, that when you have faith, you no longer worry. And if you're not going to worry, then you can focus on doing it exactly the best way. So then you trust that the way you're doing, because your head is clear now.
exactly.
You need the faith to eliminate the worrying.
Love it.
And then you can think clearly. And then you trust that you think clearly.
So you need both.
You definitely need, but you got to clear the cobwebs out first, which is faith.
Exactly. Perfect. All right, hold on one second. I just have to get my charger. It's in the office. I'm just going to pause this for a moment.
Yes.
I just added the recording in, but to explain also the Rambam, Maimonides, he adds an explanation similar to what we were just discussing. He says the difference between emuna and bitachon is like the difference between a tree that doesn't have fruit. Let me reword that. There are trees without fruit, but there's no fruit without trees. Right? You can't have a fruit if you don't have a tree, but you could have a tree without fruit. So you could believe in God philosophically, because you could say, Naomi, exactly like what you were just saying. How else did I get here? So I believe in God. But then trust is taking it to the next level, that when you're tested, it's not just I believe that God created the world or I believe that God created me. That's faith. The next level is taking it to the next place where when I'm tested, I have trust that God is wanting the best result for me and God will take care of me. Obviously, I'll do the work, but it's also coming with a trust in God. Yes, Lynn.
So a couple of things. I think faith is really very forward-looking, because the thing hasn't happened, but you're looking for God to, it's like like you said, the opposite of worry.
Yeah.
So it hasn't happened. So there's nothing you can see with your physical eyes. It requires a spiritual vision to
Yeah.
see something that physically isn't there, but you're convicted in your heart already that it's going to happen. And like Steve said, then you take the action. That would be more
Trust.
trust.
Love it.
Yeah, so that's, and then the other thing that I was thinking is when you were talking about trusting that God is with us in Isaiah 8, twice it calls that, it actually has a name. It's one of the names of God because it's Immanuel. So if we knew that instead of being this far in the sky person you can't see or respond to or doesn't respond to you, that's one thing if that's your vision of God. I think a lot of people are there. But it's another thing if you say God is
With me.
Immanuel.
Immanuel. Yeah.
Immanuel. And so how do we live if we really think that there's an L that's Immanuel?
Right.
That blows
Beautiful.
my mind, actually.
That's very nice. Although the word imanu is with an ayin, right? And the word for emuna is with an aleph. So the
That's true.
shoresh is different, but the sound for sure. In the sound, you could hear
It's
that.
something close and it's here and now.
Exactly.
So it's not about the Adonai Melech Ne'eman, right?
Right.
But it's something that is physical and present and near. And so that's a part of the amen for me is it's not out there, but it's in here too.
Exactly. And that's actually amen comes from that word emuna. That's for sure. Exactly. Good. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. Um, so another part is I'm going to ask you is bitachon is trust a mitzvah of the 613 mitzvahs. We know there's 613 mitzvahs of the Torah, but there's a big debate amongst the Rishonim, which were the early halachic authorities like Rashi and the Rambam. They were all part of the Rishonim era. They debate is bitachon, is trust in God, a mitzvah. So the Rambam, who is famous in listing out the 613 mitzvahs, he does not list trust, bitachon, as a mitzvah. But he does list it as a principle of the 13 principles of the Torah, 13 tenets of our faith. Trust is listed there, but it's not listed as one of the mitzvahs of the Torah. Another earlier commentary than the Rambam, his name is Rabbeinu Yonah, he was another halachic authority, and he does list bitachon, trust, as a mitzvah in the Torah. And of course, if you're listing a mitzvah, you have to have a source to it, right? Every mitzvah of the Rambam has a verse of where this mitzvah is from. So let's say the mitzvah to believe in one God is from the word Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, from the verse that says God is one, right? That's a mitzvah of the Torah. But where's trust from? So according to this commentator, Rabbeinu Yonah, he lists it in a mitzvah from the book of Deuteronomy, from the parsha of Shoftim, where it says, Al tira mehem, don't fear an enemy, even if they come to you with more horses and more chariots and more weapons. Don't fear them. Why? Because God is with us. So that's the source for the mitzvah of trust. Ki Hashem Elokechem, because God, your God, is with you, and therefore to battle your enemies, and therefore don't fear them because you have your trust in God. So that's where he brings the source for the mitzvah in the Torah. Another opinion is the source is also from Deuteronomy, but from a different area where it says Hamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokach. In that section, if I'm not mistaken, it's in Parashat Ki Tetzei. It says, don't follow magic or witchcraft or divination or speaking to the dead. These are all things that are forbidden in the Torah. In Hebrew, they're called Ov and Yudoni. There's different idol worship connected with them. But then it says, you shall be tamim. Now, it's hard for me to fully, properly translate tamim. It could either mean be wholehearted, be wholehearted with God, or be sincere with God, be pure with God, be innocent in the ways of God. There's different translations to the word tamim. But whatever way you're going to translate it, hamim is one of the sources for be wholehearted with God. It would mean be in full trust of God, meaning don't go after witchcraft or after divination or seeing the future because you put your trust in God. That's another source for where the mitzvah of bitachon is. There's a couple other sources also from the book of Deuteronomy where it says that you shall fear God and you shall cleave to God. What does it mean to cleave to God? So according to some opinions, it means that you shall learn from sages and from rabbinical authorities, and learn from their ways. And that's how you connect to God. But another opinion is cleave to God means have faith, have trust in God. Okay, whatever. So that's just some of the sources where we see bitachon, if it's a mitzvah, and if it is, where it's from. What I want to do now is I told you that Shar Habitachon, the gate of trust, is the fourth gate of 10 gates in Rabbeinu Bachai's book that's called Chovat Halavavot, which means duties of the heart. So I just at least quickly want to name to you the 10 gates which are included in the bigger book of duties of the heart. So the 10 gates is number one, the gate of Achdut Hashem, the oneness of God. Number two is recognize the goodness of God. Number three is acceptance of serving God, of the service of God. And then number four is trust in God alone. That's the one we're going to be focusing on, Shar Habitachon. And in the introduction, the author is going to tell us why this gate comes after serving God. We're going to get to there in a few moments. Number five, the fifth gate is how all of our actions are for God or towards God. The sixth gate is humility. The seventh gate is the power of teshuvah. The eighth gate is making a cheshbon, making an account, and making an order in our life, making an accounting of our life and a relationship with God. Number nine is an interesting one. Is not to be gluttonous and indulgent in life. And the 10th is a very important one. Is Ahavat Hashem, is loving God. And again, each of these gates, of these 10 gates, is a duty of the heart, which means recognizing the goodness of God is not a mitzvah, it's not an action base, but yet it's crucial in our service of God, or the oneness of God, or accepting the yoke and service of God, and obviously loving God is all crucial and imperative in order for our service to God to be appropriate and to be right. And like the famous teaching of the Maggid, which I've shared before, the Maggid of Mezrich, the second Hasidic Rebbe, the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, one of his famous teachings is in the mitzvah of loving God, which is from the Shema, where we say "V'ahavta Hashem l'kecha," that you shall love God. The question is, how could you command a mitzvah to love? What does it mean? You shall love God. You can't command the mitzvah on the heart. You can't command the feeling on the heart. So the answer he gives is a very famous answer. The mitzvah is actually not to love God. The mitzvah is to contemplate God. The mitzvah is to study about the greatness of God. And when you do that, it will come to love God. So yeah, the mitzvah says love God, but the work to the mitzvah is to study and to work on ourselves, to contemplate, and that will bring us to love. And that's really what we're doing over here with the gate of trust, is also working on our trust so that we could put it to use, we could put it to work. Okay, I explained about bitachon. I explained if it's a mitzvah. We'll go through the introduction a little bit. One of the other parts where you see trust is so important is a famous teaching of a famous talk of the Rebbe where he gave about Moses. Moses in the Torah portion of Shemot, in the first book of Exodus, has a very, very famous section where it says that Moses, who grew up in Pharaoh's palace, as his step grandson, went out to see his brothers, and he saw one Jew, one Hebrew, hitting another one. What happened right before that in the story, you may be familiar, is that Moshe saw an Egyptian taskmaster beating mercilessly and basically trying to kill a Jew. So Moshe defended the Jew by killing the Egyptian. So the next day, when he sees two Jews fighting, and he tells them to stop, one Jew tells him, "Will you kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" What happened? It says Moshe feared. Moshe was worried. Vayira Moshe. Moshe got worried and fearful, and he says the matter became known, meaning what he did yesterday, people know, and it's going to get back to Pharaoh. And that's exactly what happened. It got back to Pharaoh. Pharaoh ordered Moshe's execution, and Moshe was saved miraculously, as it says in the commentaries, when they tried to um, uh, uh, decapitate him, when they tried to slice his head off, his neck turned into marble, and the sword broke, and he was able to run away, and he fled to Midian. But one of the famous teachings that the Rebbe has on this simple, quite famous story is, where did it happen that Pharaoh heard about what Moshe did? It had to do with Moshe's fear. Like the verse says, Moshe became worried, and then Pharaoh heard. Why would the verse tell us what was going on in Moshe's heart? The story was that he saw two Jews hitting each other, and then Pharaoh heard. Why does the Torah have to tell us what was going on in Moshe's heart? It doesn't seem like an important part of the story. But the Rebbe learns that Moshe's fear and lack of trust is what brought about the result of Pharaoh hearing. Hearing about the news. So the Rebbe learns an incredible lesson, that our ability to trust in God actually changes the result. When a person has fear, it could bring about a negative result. When a person has trust, it could actually bring about the positive result. And as we're going to see in the introduction, one of the main arguments that the author, Rabbeinu Bachai, is going to give us is that, when it sounds a little harsh to say, so it's better when it comes from the author itself. But just in a nutshell, the way I understood it is, when you put your trust in God, God says, okay, you're putting your trust in me, come along for the ride. Let me take care of it. When you put your trust in other things, God's saying, okay, like, I'm here for you, but if you're putting your trust in things, I'm going to let the things help you. It's not even like God punishing you. It's the consequence. Like God is saying, if you're putting your trust in your financial security, go for it, but it might not be there. So in the introduction, the author, Rabbeinu Bachai, is going to be going through the different things that we could put our trust in, and how each one is not reliable. It's fascinating how he puts it in there, and how like putting our trust in God is going to be the best thing for us. It's the most reliable thing, and it's the most predictable. Because then we all know this. A person could feel that they have enough money in their bank account to retire, and then things could go haywire. Whether it's a Bernie Madoff scandal, or it could be COVID, or it could be a financial depression, whatever it is, the security that we put in our financials, or that we put in our health, it doesn't stand forever. And he's going to quote different sources for each of these things that we may put our trust in, and how it's not really there. Okay, with that, I don't have that much more of an introduction on my own, so I think we'll just go to the author's introduction. And actually, I just missed that comment, but he is going to quote from Job. He quotes some really nice sources. Let me just go back. Okay, so Naomi, the book is Shar Habitachon. You could get it on Amazon. I'm happy to put the link in here, but if you could also look in the email, as I sent it there. I'm pretty sure that quote from Job is in the book. So there's definitely a good quote from Job in the introduction. So Lynn, let's hang on for that. That's really cool. Faith is still an elusive concept for many of us, even when we learn Torah and do mitzvot. How do we gain faith in a hidden God, which seems to be a prerequisite for trusting God? Buckle up and get ready for the ride. We're going to learn about that. we're going to definitely be in that. But you're right, trust and faith, they're going to go together. One builds on the other, but we're going to try to unpack both of them. But definitely the goal of the class is to come out not just with faith, because that could just be a philosophical premise. We're trying to get the trust in God, that it's actually an exercise. It's something we use and work on, and it's a tool that we have. Awesome. So you're welcome, if you have the book, you're welcome to open it up. No worry at all, because I'm going to be pulling it up on the screen. But I just love how they broke it up here and made it into chapters. And we're going to start with introduction. The introduction is very long. In this book, it's like 30 pages or so, 35 pages. So it's going to take us some time to get into it. If you're going to be looking inside, I'm trying to see what page it's on. There's acknowledgements, and it's going to be on page 2. But I'm going to pull it up on the screen right now, and we're going to do it together. Here we go. That's not it. Got it. So here it is. You can find it on Chabad.org. And we're going to start with the introduction and part 1. So introduction is here. And let's just get the English of this. I'm going to zoom in. All right. I hope everyone could see the screen well enough. I take that as a yes. Okay, here we go. In the introduction to Shar Habitachon, the Gate of Trust, the author discusses the benefits that having Bitachon, trust in God, brings a person, both in Torah and worldly matters. In total, he lists 5 Torah benefits and 5 worldly benefits. So 10 benefits for having trust in God. So we're going to bring this as benefits in our life, spiritual and practical, in having trust in God. So the bold words is going to be the actual translation of the book. On placing our trust in God alone, author's introduction. The author begins his introduction to Shar Habitachon by explaining the connection between this gate and the preceding gate. If you remember, I told you there was 10 gates in the book called Duties of the Heart. This gate, the 4th one, follows the 3rd one, which is Shar Avodat Ha'Elokim, the gate of the service of God. He explains that the reason why he placed Shar Habitachon immediately after Shar Avodat Ha'Elokim is that having trust in God is paramount in order to be a true servant of God. So that's why once you have the gate of serving God, the first thing that you need after that is having trust in God. Having previously discussed in the previous gate the obligation to accept the service of God, I have seen it to be appropriate to now explain that which is most necessary for a person who wishes to be a servant of God, and that is to rely on him in all his matters. For by doing so, there will be great benefits, both in Torah matters and in the worldly matters. If a person places his trust in God, it will be easier for him to act in accordance with the ways of the Torah. It will also be easier for him to acquire his materialistic needs, as the author explains. So whether it's material or Torah, it'll be easier for you to go about in life with this trust in God. The author now lists 5 ways in which bitachon is beneficial to Torah matters. So these are some extra commentaries. All right, I guess let's try it. Most necessary. The word most necessary is right here, right? So this is a little commentary on the words most necessary. So when it says most necessary, there's a commentary from the son of the Rambam. His name was Rabbi Avram, son of the Rambam. Maimonides writes that trust in God may he be exalted and blessed, is one of the choicest character traits we can have. It is, in fact, one of the foundations of the Torah, and therefore we don't find anyone who argues against its necessity. In his commentary to Proverbs, the Vilna Gaon, the genius of Vilna, writes, trust is a general commandment that protects us from transgressing any of the commandments. So it's a general commandment, which means it's not one of the 613 according to this, but it's like a super mitzvah, which means in order to be able to fulfill all the other mitzvahs, you need trust. Or if you have trust in God, you won't be transgressing any of the other mitzvahs. From a letter of the Rebbe, we must know that faith and trust cannot merely remain in our thoughts, rather they must permeate the totality of our lives. The first step of faith is that God controls the world. If he can care for billions of people, we can be sure that in regard to personal matters, we will see the fulfillment of the promise stated in the verse in Isaiah where it says, I have made you and I will carry you, I will sustain and deliver you, which is a beautiful quote from Isaiah. So the bottom line, if God can take care of the entire universe, he can take care of you. Just a beautiful. Okay, so that was just some commentary. The bottom line is not the actual words of the book. It's just a put together by the authors of this English translation, who put together some extra commentaries for us. So the great benefits. Although the author makes no mention of a commandment here, writing only that it is beneficial to have trust in God, in his introduction, he clearly states examples of positive commandments from among the duties of the heart are to place one's trust in him. While Rambam does not, so this is basically what I was telling you outside, the Rambam does not list bitachon among the 613 mitzvot. We find numerous authorities who do list it as at least a component of one of the mitzvot. So the main one I quoted to you was Rabbeinu Yonah. He explains that bitachon is an extension of the negative commandments that states that a soldier may not fear the enemy during combat. When you go out to war against your enemy and you will see a horse, a chariot, a nation bigger than you, you shall not fear them. We are hereby warned that if a person sees an immediate calamity, God's salvation shall be in his heart, and he should place his trust in it. So that's the mitzvah based on the Rabbeinu Yonah for trusting in God. Elsewhere, Rabbeinu Yonah, who comments on Proverbs, attributes the commandment of trust to the commandment of fear, suggesting that true fear of God is attained through a complete trust that everything comes from him. Rabbeinu Yonah also attributes trust to the commandment of faith, suggesting that trust in God is the fullest extension of man's faith. Right? When you have faith, the full extension of faith is trust in God. However, Charedim, which is a book that is more recent than Sefer Charedim, it's called, cites many opinions that bitachon is an independent commandment in the list of the 613 mitzvahs. And he says complete trust in God is a commandment as it states, Hamim tiyah, be complete with the Lord your God. Charedim goes on to quote Ramban Nachmanides, who also considers the above-mentioned verse a positive commandment, not to seek the future from astrologers or the like. Rather, we must believe that everything is from God and that it can annul all the astrological signs if we come close to God. From this, we see that it is a commandment to place our full trust in God regarding all our affairs. Master Chachma explains that commandment of cleaving to God as a commandment to place our trust in God, and Kinat Sofrim writes, how can daily prayer not be a biblical commandment when the intent of prayer is also to ask the Creator every day to fill all our material needs, without which we cannot live? And it is with that prayer that we yearn for his mercy, because we believe that he oversees everything and that he provides bread to all flesh. So the bottom line of this commentary is faith is not something that can remain merely in your thoughts. Rather, it must permeate the totality of your life. So in short, you could have different sources of where you can see the mitzvah of trust in God, whether it is a mitzvah or it's not. But ultimately, if your faith wants to be real, it has to be every area of your life permeated with faith, and that's building on it with trust in God. And the final word that the author just told us was both in Torah matters and in worldly matters. The author continues to explain the benefits of our relationship with God when we truly trust in him. In attributing the power of trust to all areas of life, the author is including every type of person, whether their main pursuit is wealth and materialism or a pious ascetic life. Trust in God will be beneficial. So wherever you're coming from, trust in God is going to be important. Bitachon helps every single person, regardless of his pursuits and aspirations. So that's section 1 of the commentary of the introduction. Let's go to the next part. Back to the English. Okay, so the first benefit is that bitachon causes a person to be free from worry, allowing him to devote his energy to serving God. Among the Torah benefits is tranquility of the soul, which is free of worry as a result of his reliance on God, just as a servant is bound to place his trust in his master. In the next few paragraphs, the author will illustrate how only a person who relies on God can be truly free of worry and have a peaceful state of mind. Tranquility of the soul as a result of his reliance on God. Trust in God has its own inherent benefits. Baal Shem Tov teaches that a person must pray for his trust to be strengthened, because when God desires to punish, he begins by removing that person's trust in him, right? Because if a person has trust, God can't punish them. So we need to pray that our trust be strengthened, which is a powerful idea. This can be understood in light of a statement by Rabbi Shmuel, the fourth Lubavitch Rebbe, known as the Rebbe Marash. A Jew is never deficient in sustenance. Rather, he is deficient in his trust of God. There is an abundance of sustenance prepared for every Jew. However, if a person is deficient in trust, the sustenance does not reach him. Meaning there's enough money to go around. The money is there for us. If a person lacks trust, the money doesn't make it to our account. If a person has the trust, then the money reaches us. But it's ours. It's there. We just need the trust in order for it to reach us. The Lubavitch Rebbe explains that bitachon is like a faucet. When we have it, the faucet is open and our blessings pour through. However, when we lack it, the faucet is closed, meaning it's there. It's just a matter of opening the faucet. When you have bitachon, the faucet is open and the water comes through. A servant is bound to place his trust in his master. So I hope you're understanding. I just want to explain to you maybe I'll just show it to you what it looks like in the book. If let me just stop sharing for a second, just so you could see. In the book, there's the top above the line, and then there's commentaries below the line. Over here in the book, they are putting it together. So it's kind of in a little bit of a shaded area, but I'm taking the liberty to still study that section. But the section, you see, it's like kind of in a shaded area, shaded boxes. It's basically quoting different words from the author. So over here, it's a servant is bound to place his trust in his master. That's words on what we just said. A servant is bound to place his trust in his master. And over here, the translator is giving a comment on it. I think it's beneficial to learn all of it, but I'm open to feedback if you think it's a little bit too elaborate. A servant is bound to place his trust in his master. The first benefit of bitachon with regards to religious life is a state of tranquility, which allows us to dedicate ourselves to the service of God. The author explains that this with the parable of a servant who must rely on his master to take care of all his needs and is only concerned with his responsibility to his master. In a similar vein, as servants of God, we trust that God will take care of our needs, and we therefore only concern ourselves with fulfilling our duties toward him. And the bottom line is, bitachon is like a faucet. When you have it, the faucet is open and your blessings pour through. However, when you lack it, the faucet is closed. So I do enjoy the comparison the author makes with a servant, that the servant trusts that he trusts in the master, meaning the master will take care of him. And therefore, the servant's entire goal is to do what the master asks of him, because he knows that all his needs are taken care of. We have actually just an adorable couple in our community. Their names are Ken and Yana. And we know them all the way from when we first moved here in March of 2012. They were from the first people we met. But Yana, kind of took it upon herself that her job is to take care of the Landas so that we could take care of the community. So whatever we need in our home, she'll come. She says, you need a new dishwasher, you need a new toaster oven, you need a new set of pots. because she wants to make sure we have everything we need so that we could take care of the community. So can't really compare that to the book, but in a similar way, if we put our trust in God, God will take care of whatever we need in order for that Hashem could, so that we could serve God. So after the point over here is after the previous gate that the author was teaching, which is about the gate about serving God, putting our full service to God, the first thing we need to know as being a servant is to put our trust in God. And God will take care of us. And there's 10 benefits in putting our trust in God. So before we get into the practice of how to trust God, the introduction is starting with telling us the benefits of trusting in God. So it really whets our appetite to be excited to trust in God. And he's going to go through 10 advantages of trusting in God, 5 of them being more spiritual and 5 of them being more practical. So in the spiritual one, when we put our trust in God, it brings us to a place of tranquility, that God will take care of us. We're more at peace, knowing that we'll have whatever we need. So let's just try to finish this section. We're about to get to our time. For a person who does not place his trust in God, places his trust in an entity other than God. And this is a very, very powerful idea where you're going to put your trust in something, because that's the natural default of a human being, is we need to trust in something. So if it's not going to be trusting in God, it's going to be trusting in something else. And none of that will bring us to a place of tranquility. If a person does not place his trust in God to take care of him, he is de facto placing his trust in an entity other than God. An entity other than God. There are those who, instead of trusting in God, place trust in themselves and their own abilities, in other people, whether professionals or in the constellations, waiting for their lucky star to strike. All this is contrary to the tranquility achieved by placing trust in God alone. From a letter of the Rebbe, you have 2 options. Until you see the fulfillment of the blessings, you can go about anxious that perhaps, heaven forbid, the blessing will not be fulfilled. Even after the blessing is fulfilled, you will continue to worry. Why did I have to waste so much energy worrying for nothing? Alternatively, you can be strong in your trust and faith in God, that he will lead you on the proper path and fulfill all the blessings with which you have been bestowed. Afterwards, when you see the fulfillment of the blessings, you can tell yourself, see how well I handled myself by not worrying about matters over which there was no need for concern. Bottom line is, place your trust in God, and this peace of mind will allow you to dedicate yourself to divine service. When you don't place your trust in God, you're constantly you won't have peace of mind. And therefore, you're always worrying. But if you put your trust in God, you'll have peace of mind. And therefore, if you have peace of mind, you could dedicate yourself in the service of God. Okay, I think we're going to stop here, but I do see some comments. Let me just stop sharing the screen. King David said, some trust in chariots or horses. Exactly. But I love that. Yeah, it's one of our favorite chapters. We say it every Shabbat in services. Amazing. Very good. Okay, so I will text everyone a link would it be helpful if I text you a link to this online version? If you don't mind, I'm just going to add it right now in the screen, in the Zoom. So you're welcome to click on it, and you'll have that to your library. But I'll also share it again next week. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. Shar Habitachon, may we have a day full of trust in God and a tranquil day, that we can be very productive in our service of God. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, Steve. Bye, Lynn. Bye, Naomi. Bye, Vivian. Bye, Freda. Have a great day.